Yeah, just going for it.
What car is
But
that?
it's Audi Quattro. What is it? Group B is what it
Group B.
says. Yeah.
Oh, sounds good.
So
Sounds really
yeah, the
good.
video. Yeah, it's like I have so much respect for those guys. I mean, any racing driver, but when you
Rally's
watch
another
like,
level, man.
yeah, it is. It's another world. What do you think about that? Do you think is it more difficult or is it just different
Rallying,
than
I think
circuit
it's
racing?
much more difficult. Much more difficult. Well, hang on. The difficulty in circuit racing is perfection because you're going around and around, and every single lap you want to do slightly better. In rallying, there's so many more dynamics, but I don't think it's a fair comparison. To be 100% honest, the comparison is that you're driving a car, but circuit racers don't necessarily excel at rallying, and vice versa. Um, Sebastian Loeb did okay on circuits, but he wasn't exceptional.
Hmm.
And neither is Ogier when he races Carrera Cup and stuff. Or what's it? What's the top one? Porsche Super Cup. Yeah. So,
Right.
um, they. It's very difficult to make the sort of direct comparisons, but they have exceptional car control, and they have this ability to listen to someone who's telling them where to turn and sort of save that in their mind or thinking
Hmm.
while they're going through this corner. They're like, okay, two corners later, you know, 300, hard right six, first gear, or, depending on if it's right one, and they, it depends how what their notes are. But it's phenomenal. And I love watching rally onboards, and I'm so upset that WRC no longer publish long onboards on their YouTube channel.
Right.
There's a
Yeah,
really
because
cool. Sorry, go.
there's like watching like fun hobbyist guys, but then watching WRC, like even listening to a couple guys. Who was it? Ken Block or who or Travis Pastrana, right?
Yeah,
I'm butchering whoever it is. Um, Listening to him talk about like trying to get in like the level that he's at, and then like the WRC guys. I mean, it's just like it's in a whole
yeah. I think it
different
was
level.
Ken Block. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it might have been, but
yeah.
yeah, that's what and then like listening to like feedback rather than like memorizing the track, memorizing every bump, every curb. It's more listening to the car too, the feel and touch almost.
Yeah, and I think they have this sort of dynamic sense of timing, which circuit racers don't necessarily have, because we have maybe better anticipation because we know it's coming. But yeah, it's just. Uh, I've driven a rally car once. I drove an R2, and it was just amazing. I just realized I was not going fast enough, and I do think I would
Mhm.
absolutely enjoy it, but I don't know how good I would be at it necessarily. But I
Mhm.
would love to do a rally, like a whole event. I would love it.
But it's also kind of like being in the wet on a circuit, right? Because then you're really going more by feel. Is that right?
Initially, yes. It depends how
Or
well you prepare. I mean, we had a wet track in Suzuka 2 weeks ago in the first practice. But I prepared so much and so well that nothing was a surprise to me necessarily.
mhm.
But it felt like I'd done the track many times before, even though it was wet.
Hmm.
Rallying, I don't think you get that. When they get to Rally Finland, even though they're doing the same stage again, the conditions are very different compared to the year before.
Right. And so, how do you learn a new track? How like the whole from never being there
I'm,
to being on a podium?
yeah,
How do you do that?
well, I'm pretty obsessive about this stuff. I'm definitely, I don't consider myself the most talented racing driver, but I know I work as hard as the hardest working racing driver. So, like, well, we can use Suzuka as an example, but that's an easy example because it's on almost every single simulator or video game. But it starts with me watching onboard videos, and I'll watch any onboard video I can find, not necessarily just GT3, but if there's GT500 or Formula One, I'll watch those. I'll make notes. Then I will open up Google Maps, and then I trace the racetrack myself using Adobe Illustrator. So I'll whip out the vectors and stuff and trace it, because I'm an interface designer as well, so I know how to use those tools and everything. And that sort of when I'm tracing the racetrack, it's a weird. It's like meditating on the track. You're taking it all in. You're realizing the radius of each corner, maybe what the potential ideal line is and everything. And then I get on the simulator and I do as many deliberate laps as I can. But I don't just go round and round. I will take what I've seen from the onboard videos and try and find a car that's similar in terms of gear ratios and feeling and stuff, and come up with like a program of some kind. So for Suzuka, I would always do a 90-minute session and was broken up into different practice sessions. And I would start with a 3-lap run on old tires, then box for super sticky tires and do a 2-lap run. And then I would call that my baseline. So I always knew, like, with this specific sim, with this specific car on Suzuka, my hard tire run was a 2 minutes 0.2 is the best lap time, and on the super softs, I could do a 57.5. And then every morning for like 2 weeks, I would start with that baseline and see, okay, this morning I'm about half a second off, or I just broke the record, my personal record rather, and that's how I prepare. So every day I'm thinking about that racetrack,
Hmm.
and
How
then when you get
important
there,
is the
it's
sim then? I mean, because you're not, are your breaking points the same? Or is it completely different when you actually get in the car? I mean, you
sometimes they're
kind
the
of just
same.
keep it in your head.
Turn one is the same in the sim. There's an exit road going into turn one, and in the sim, you turn and brake at that exit road, and it's the same in real life. What the sims don't necessarily get right is curbing and stuff, and this drives me completely mad. I mean, I just
Hmm.
don't understand it. I mean, these the guys who are producing these sims are very diligent guys, and I've been speaking a lot with the Assetto Corsa, because I said, guys, it's not just a matter of making the track look the same. It has to, everything has to look the same, and that includes your curbing. I corrected them on a couple of curbs at Spa, um, and I couldn't find a game which had a really accurate representation of Suzuka. Like when you're going through the S's in Suzuka, the curbs are really big in real life, and in the
Hmm.
games they're almost flat. You take to the grass almost. So there are similarities, but I it's a combination. It's what you see on the onboards via YouTube and what you produce in The Sims. The lines were very similar, except for Degner. Um, but yeah, I'm a big sim gamer, player rather, and I believe a lot in using Sims to become a better racing driver, like in a big way.
Do you find, because I know you were on iRacing, did you kind of get away from that?
The only reason I didn't continue is because I was playing on a Mac, and the drivers on a Mac can't give you force feedback and steering.
Oh, right.
But at the same time, I don't like the iRacing business model, and I don't like. Now, bear in mind, I was playing in 2016 on iRacing, and at the time, if you touched a curb at Monza, for example, the car would almost flip over. So they
Yeah.
had the opposite problem. They overcompensated with the effect of curbing. I find this in many sims actually. Their interpretation of how a car responds to a curb is either completely undercooked or exaggerated.
Hmm.
Whereas when you're in the car itself, um, curbs are aggressive, but they don't flip the car over. But at the same time, you can't just ram them without thinking about them. Um, so some games haven't really got that right yet, and I've played quite a few, and it's not perfect in my opinion.
Right. It's, I mean, it's definitely getting there. I think another
Yeah,
5 to 10 years I might need, but
I think I think another big issue is the the head of physics in all cases aren't necessarily driving GT3 cars, and who can blame them? I mean, to test a Ferrari for a day at say Barcelona is 40,000 euros. You
Mhm.
know, so you need big budgets for that type of stuff. So they're relying on the feedback of racing drivers and experienced gamers to help them develop these things.
Right.
And they do an amazing job. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if I didn't have if I didn't have video games to use on a daily basis when I wasn't racing, I wouldn't be where I am today without Sims. But I'm always I just want them to be better, and I have the benefit or the privilege rather of being able to go to a racetrack, drive the racing car that you have in the video game, come back to the game and be like, this is not the same. You know, not everyone has that opportunity.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then, so how it's you said it's pretty close, but it's not quite there. One thing that I have always wondered, like, especially if you're kind of learning, if you're learning like the feel of a GT3 car in the sim, and you go to the track and say, um, you're working on getting used to a track, you're doing a couple practice sessions. How a part of the setup and the strategy is the driver, or is are the engineers kind of like, okay, this is the setup you're going to drive, and this is what we're going to do, and you just got to do your best, or do you is it kind of more of a back and forth?
It depends on the engineer. And sometimes you have an engineer who doesn't like your opinion or doesn't want to know your opinion. He just wants your feedback, and then he will come up with the setup. Those are generally, and I mean this in the least offensive way, because they still do a good job, obviously. It's just a different style. But generally, those kinds of engineers are the ones who come from university and who studied engineering and understand physics better than anyone.
Mhm.
um, in my, I personally struggle with those engineers the most, but I can absolutely work with them. On the other side, you have engineers which like it when you come in and you're like, the car's rolling too much. In my opinion, I would go stiffer with the rear anti-roll bar. Those are more engineers which have no formal training, but have years and years of experience in setting up cars and have a sort of internal mental database of what works and what doesn't. But generally, you get to a racetrack and the setup is mostly done for you, and then you're tweaking the dampers or the anti-roll bar. Anti-roll bar is usually the first thing you go to, and then these days I'm learning a lot about the differential, which I used to use a lot in video games and understand really well. But my first 2 or 3 years in racing, my engineers never wanted to touch the diff. So it's quite fun now being able to tweak one of my favorite tools that I had in the game. Um, Sometimes you'll get to a racetrack and they're like, yeah, we're going to try stiffer springs today. But I think we're going to land up on soft ones, but let's try the stiffer ones. And then you work on a setup around that. That's fun. But yeah, it's not like in the games. In the games, you can change everything,
Right.
but that's also how you get lost. In real life, if you're the pro driver in a pro am car, you only getting 5 laps a session if you're lucky. Sometimes three, sometimes none. So most of the time, you don't get the new tires, so you only have 5 laps to set up the car, which means they put you in the car, you go out, you do 3 flying laps, you box, you say it's running too much, they tweak the anti-roll bar, you go out, you come, you're like, okay, this is workable. Then the amateur drives for the rest of the session and you think about the setup. Then you'll make one more tweak. You go out the next session, 3 flying laps, box, cool, I like this change. Okay, done.
Hmm.
So that's how little it is. Yeah, that's how little it
It's
is.
crazy, but I suppose they
Yeah.
want as much seat time as possible for the amateur driver, huh?
Well, they're the ones who can gain the most lap time. I can maybe gain at the most a second. They can gain up to three
Right.
seconds. So yeah,
So for one thing I've always wondered is, if you look like F1, I mean, you've got the midfield cars, and even the ones at the back of the field. They know they have no chance in hell at getting you know, a top,
Mm.
you know, even a podium. Even like Max usually says
Yeah.
he's like, well, I think what did he do at Monza? I think P4 or what?
P3 and then deducted
Yeah.
to P5.
But then it was just weird because it's like his reaction because he was just behind the Mercedes and the Ferrari. He's like, yep, that's the best we could have done. And I'm just
Mm.
wondering, um, is that how similar is that to like GT racing from the top runners toward and then the ones that are further down the field? I mean, since there is a balance of performance from team to team, from car to car, is there that much of a speed difference in the car, or is it the drivers? Because no matter what team you find yourself on, it seems like you're at the front. So that's one thing I've kind of wondered: is it really more reliant on the driver? Then does it balance it better, or the team is it pretty unbalanced at the top end?
There's many layers to this answer. The first one is the key thing is if you're racing in the AM category or in the Pro AM category or the Pro category, your target must only be, only in quotes, to win your category. So you become fixated on the drivers in your category. And the guys who get ahead of themselves and try and become, if they're an AM car and they try to beat the Pro AMs, they usually don't finish races. They're taking too big a risk. So that's always been my philosophy personally from day one. That means when I arrive at a racetrack, I'm not thinking about getting pole position overall. I'm only thinking about getting pole position in AM.
Mhm.
At the same time, that also means that our setups, if you're racing in an AM car, your setups are very much biased towards the slowest driver in your car. And that usually means it doesn't suit the pro driver because AM drivers don't like oversteer,
Mhm.
no matter what they tell you. If you give them a car where the rear is moving in a high speed corner, they lose a lot of confidence and multiple seconds. And I'm not talking like 1 to 2 seconds, I'm talking up to 8 to 10 seconds because they have no confidence in the car. So you compromise the setup a lot in the way that you build in a lot of understeer um, for a pro driver, but for the AM driver, it feels to them like a very neutral car. And this costs you lap time.
Hmm.
Um, and initially, you get frustrated about that. I was when I first joined GT3, but then I was like, I'm here to do a professional job, and my professional job is bring the car home in the AM category. And I started to enjoy that challenge. Um, you also get on the other side, you will see almost immediately that a certain manufacturer at a certain racetrack has an advantage. For example, in Suzuka, we kind of knew that the Mercedes looked after its tires better in the last 5 or 6 laps, and that was proven in the data and in the race. So you come up with like other things, but your first target is win the category, and then your next target is be the best manufacturer. So I mean, be the best car within your manufacturer's group. So at Silverstone, I only qualified 10th, but I was the fastest Ferrari, and there was a lot of Ferraris there, and they had a lot of good drivers. So I was unhappy in a way, but I was also happy, and I realized that it just seemed that at the GT Open at Silverstone, Ferrari wasn't our track. I mean, Silverstone wasn't our track for Ferraris, and it was only in qualifying. In the race, we had a lot of pace, but I don't know why we just couldn't switch the tires on in the first 3 laps. So initially, my engineer in the qualifying, he was like, I think it was like 3 minutes to go. I had one more opportunity to do a good lap, and he says to me, "Okay, we're P5 overall." And I was like, in my head, I'm like, "P5? I'll accept P5." And then almost when he's like, "Oh no, now we're P8, now we're P10," and I just came on the radio. I'm like, "Okay, stop talking. I need to focus now." So it depends on the event, and I mean, Suzuka, we surprised ourselves when we qualified in the overall pole position. That was phenomenal,
Mhm.
and probably one of the most enjoyable days of my life as a racing driver. But I kept looking at my guys and saying, "Guys, do not lose focus. We have to win Pro Am. Forget about Pro.
Right.
We have to win Pro Am." and they got it. But it meant that even though we got the overall pole, we were thinking about something else.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point because I mean, that's where your championship is anyway. You know, you're not in a pro car or a manufacturer. You
No,
know,
it depends on your co-drivers as well. I've been lucky. I've always had good co-drivers relative to my category, but finding a good pro lineup all round is not easy. It is absolutely not easy to find three exceptional pro drivers which can dominate. Um, I I can't think of a pairing at the moment. I'm not sure if you can offhand, like a GT3 pairing which is consistently as a duo or as a trio, always in the same car and always excelling. Maybe Bortolotti and Engelhardt from last year. Um, but even so, this year they're struggling a little bit with the BOP. But yeah, you always have these sort of internal challenges where it's like, okay, step one, be the fastest in your class. Step two, be the fastest Ferrari. Step three, where do we finish overall? But the overall is always my last thought. It's like a cherry on top. Like in Spa, I think we finished 15th or 13th. I need to be corrected. But we started 50th.
yeah.
So that was an amazing cherry on top. But I cared more that we won Pro-Am more than anything.
And you're a silver now. Um,
Mm.
so then one thing that I've like it seems like it's kept under the curtain a little bit is at what point is it silver, gold, or is it not until platinum where you are either a full-time where you don't pay anything or you get paid?
Golds don't pay anything um, because they're golds, and platinums are usually, if you're a factory driver, you are you go to platinum immediately. Well, the following year. So my friend Jordan Pepper, he's silver now, but he's signed by Bentley as a factory driver. So next year he will be platinum, which obviously means he's getting paid. Um, Golds are usually paid, but it's not a linear thing. Often silvers are paying because the silver is not necessarily a pro. It's more like an inexperienced slash amateur pro. It's usually like a young driver, like a 25-year-old who's moved from single seaters. He has no experience in GT. No team is going to pay that guy because that guy has no experience. He needs to learn, and teams are going to fund your education.
Right.
Um, so there's that. If you're a bronze driver, some, we call them fake bronzes, are paid. Technically, that's not allowed. If you earn money from racing, according to the rules, you should be ranked at least as a silver. But that stuff, it's always just a rumor. So you never know who's actually
Right.
being paid. And I was a fast bronze, and I never got any financial offers. In fact, I had to pay, even as probably at the time I was probably the fastest bronze around. But every seat I looked for, they're like, cool, it's 100,000 or it's 10,000 or whatever the case is. It was never for free. Um, this year, I race for free, um, and I hope next year I race for money. That'll be my that'll be
I've read a
amazing.
couple of your articles on your blog, and I mean, you talked about how you got really good at sponsorships because you have to raise money. I mean, if you want to fund your amateur career, you have to raise money.
Mhm.
What what kind of advice can you give to like people that do want to raise money? How does it work? I mean, um, do you? I mean, do you got to know somebody? Is it hustle? And what are those
Yeah.
structures like look like? Say like how did it work for you?
It started with me paying for myself, 100%. Um, and I've never, I raised, there's different ways you can raise money, I suppose. The one is through your family, the other is through friends. The other is through convincing a brand to back you for whatever reason. And in my case, it was more about, I don't know what the right word is, but sort of private investors, if you want. But they weren't investing in me; they were just helping me. Um, and all the money that I managed to raise, there was a period in karting where one or two people were paying for my racing. Um, and then in 2016, someone paid for my racing. They always backed me because I was so dedicated and I was sacrificed everything. And these guys seem to like that
Mhm.
in me. Um, and I get that. If I do, I hope one day I'm in a position where I can help a young kid. I really do hope that I'm in that position one day. But even so, I'm not going to help the first kid that comes and asks me for money. I'm going to need to see that the kid's willing to sell his PlayStation, to get a set of tires because I did. I'm going to measure them against what I did, and I did everything, um, everything that I knew I could do. So there was guys who were managed to help me, or who were willing to help me based on that. Um, but I've never convinced a brand to give me money, and that is one of my frustrations. I just can't seem to. I'm a bad salesman in that regard. I've been in rooms where people have been like, "Yeah, cool, come pitch us your idea," da, 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 and I've completely
Mhm.
flaked. I'm horrific in those positions because I think deep down I have always felt that when you put your sticker on a car, you effectively unless it's for tax benefits, there's not much else to it. And yeah, so either I've paid for myself and I've done it through bank loans, I've done it through selling everything I had. Um, I did it once through I raised money on a sort of GoFundMe page, and the teams have helped me a lot. And then I've been introduced to people who I didn't ask them immediately. That's the other thing. Like a lot of young drivers, they get introduced to a wealthy guy, and within like two meetings, they're already asking the guy for like 100,000 euros.
Right.
It's like, slow
Yeah.
down, man. Both the guys who helped me, it took 6 months of developing a relationship with them where they could trust me to know that this money was going to racing, and I wasn't going to waste their money. Their sort of what do you call it? Their support that they were giving me, it wasn't going to be wasted. I was going to give it my all, even if I didn't succeed, and it took a long time. It took a really long time, but it was nonstop. But I get a lot of emails from kids who they're like, "Oh, I've got a lot of talent, and like no one's willing to sponsor me." I'm like, "Yeah, of course not.
Right.
Everybody has a lot of talent. The difference is the guys who have made it, they were able to make a plan. That is what gets you on the grid, not your speed. It's your ability to make a plan."
and and I think that's such a huge thing that because I get tons of emails too for racing teams that want sponsorships, and it's like you can tell it's a copy paste
Mm,
email, and it's like
yeah.
I mean I'm at such a low level. If you go to a big brand that's going to be putting out real money, it's not like it's not if you're on a date
Mm.
with a girl, you're not going to ask them to marry you in the first date. They'll be out of there, and it's the
Yeah.
relationship building. I've
Yeah.
because
It's a
I've even looked
relationship.
into raising like venture capital, and I've thought about it and stuff, but um, it's the same way. If
Yeah.
you're talking to a VC or an angel investor, I would be, I'm on such a small scale. I'd be talking to like someone that'd be looking to give me seed money, um, like pre
Mm.
first round type stuff. But yeah, you're not gonna ask them for money the first time you meet them or the first time you talk to them. I mean,
Exactly.
that's
It's a process. It's a long process, and a lot of people don't understand that. Like, yeah, well, I try to get sponsorship. It's like, dude, you're probably going about it the wrong way. Like, you probably went to the corporate website, found the sponsorship page, and hit that email. And I guarantee you, that email is designed to
mhm,
go to trash. They never see it. You've got to go to LinkedIn, You got to find a connection. You got to see if that person knows one of your friends. You got to ask your friend to introduce you to that person. You got to go to coffee with them without a pitch
Yep.
deck, and you got to feel out if they're searching for new ways to market their products and stuff. And it starts from
Right.
there, you know.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Is like you kind of doing like a soft, like if you are meeting with someone, kind of like the soft pitch almost, where it's like if it does come up, you can be like, yeah,
Yes.
I am looking to find ways to raise money, you know, and then maybe talk to them. And I do offer these things, but it's tough because it's kind of like a chicken or the egg. It's like, well, why would they want to put money into you if you don't have a following? But it's hard to have a following if you can't fund your career, you know? So,
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. So, one of the best things I did was I found a PR company which was really affordable in my hometown, and I used some of my money to pay them to sort of put me in magazines and stuff. Um, Famous sportsman stuff. They don't get into magazines randomly, just by the way, or on TV. That
right.
it's not random. It's their agent or someone who's pushing all the time to get them into these things. So that really helped me raise my profile in South
That is
Africa.
super interesting because I've noticed that. Because I mean, I've been following you since when you were doing Super Trofeo, because you had a helmet
Yeah.
cam on YouTube, and that's how I found you at
Mm.
Monza.
Yes.
And so um,
Yes.
and I noticed that your content is like so high quality, and I was wondering how you did that. It's interesting.
Oh, I do all the content myself.
Right.
Um, Even when my PR company needed something written, I would write it for them. Um, they were just my constant. They were looking to always get my content somewhere.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it makes me so upset when I see young racing drivers who aren't doing their social media and stuff. It's like,
Right.
dude, you have to shout about yourself. It's awkward and it's uncomfortable, and maybe your friends will laugh at you, whatever.
Right.
But if you're not shouting about yourself, no one else is gonna. Yeah, it's just part of the game. You have to learn how to market yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And even
Yeah,
one thing, because that's one big thing, like the discrepancy between endurance racing and Formula One. I've always wondered why is there such an insane audience like gap there?
I can
And
tell you.
what do you think?
I think well, there's many elements to it, many pieces to it, but I think a key thing, especially amongst like in Formula One at the moment. Okay, yes, you have Mercedes versus Ferrari, but it's primarily Hamilton versus Vettel, right? And in GT racing, what do you have?
Yeah, it's manufacturers. It's like, oh, look at the Mercedes is leading or whatever.
But do you hear Porsche bad mouthing Mercedes or creating any tension? No.
Right.
Do you hear any of the drivers bad mouthing each other? No. Or just offering up some form of rivalry. Yeah, I was reading about. I read a lot of sports books, and I was reading about Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, or Kobe Bryant and Shaq O'Neal, even though they were on the same team, they were constantly bad mouthing each other and creating this like interest and this. They were creating a divisiveness where you would pick a side. You were either a Shaq guy or Kobe guy. You don't get that in GTS. It's kind of frustrating. There's this distinct lack of rivalry,
Mhm.
and it's not like everyone loves each other at the racetrack. Like there's drivers who don't like each other, but they will never voice that. And anyway, we don't have a microphone to voice it. I mean, when you're watching Blancpain, if there's an incident on track and the drivers come in, it's actually kind of rare where the TV cameras come to the driver and say, "What did you think? Why did XYZ drive into you?"
Mhm.
Whatever the case is, they don't even provoke it.
Right.
So
They're al-
yeah, and
they're almost like too
Formula One
professional.
is
That's
Formula One.
because I know you're a Gary Vaynerchuk fan, and that's what he talks about. He
Yes,
talks about storytelling.
storytelling is key. The reason I was able to get into so many sort of publications in South Africa is because I had a story to tell, fine, But I learned very early, in my early 20s, what my story was. And I learned that these tough guys who are always in these podcasts or radio interviews, they're actually kind of repeating themselves quite a lot, but they're refining their story each time so that people recognize Gary, like Gary V. He came from Soviet Russia, moved here with his father, his parents. His father opened a wine store. He
Hmm.
took over the wine store. Like he's got a spiel, and a lot of drivers don't develop that spiel. They don't have the story that they can always say. How did you become a racing driver? Well, I went from karting and then I won a championship and then I went to Formula and I won a race
Yeah.
and then I decided I didn't gonna wasn't gonna be a Formula One driver. It's like, dude, that's not gonna work. Like,
And then I sent a bunch of
you know,
emails.
Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, Lewis Hamilton has his story. He grew up in a caravan. His dad had four jobs. They went karting with old equipment. They beat the guys. And then Hamilton got off his own ass at an Autosports Award, went to speak to Ron Dennis, and a year later, Ron Dennis called him. And everyone knows that story.
Hmm.
But that's the thing. Everyone knows the story. You know, the fact that Hamilton won races and stuff is a subplot, actually.
Right.
So young racing drivers do need to be aware of where they're coming from and be able to talk about that.
How can, say, GT driving, or just the series as a whole, say, like
Mm.
an endurance series or a sprint series, or what I'm really interested in is the sim racing leagues that are coming up. How do they tell a better story to grow that audience? I mean, do you think that those audiences are tapped out, or is there a huge opportunity still?
Are you talking about the GT? I mean, sorry, the sim racing guys?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of going on both ends, but that's like,
Yeah.
um, well, yeah, we'll say the sim racing world. Even um, there's a lot of
I
different
think
leagues right
those,
now, but they're all small.
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's the infancy. It's a very, very early phase. When I created my WordPress company with my brother, there was only five of us, maybe 10 WordPress theme companies, and it was so nascent, it was so young that it was a bit messy, and we were kind of copying each other, and there's a little bit of espionage, and like it was such a niche little thing. And then now these days, it's when I start 23, 30, just 10 years later, it's a massive multi-million dollar industry, and it's much more mature, and you have it's just the nature of the beast at the moment. Racing esports has only come along in the last 3 years, and I'd say only in the last year where it's getting mainstream coverage in the racing world. I mean, you're now starting to read about Force India and Sauber and McLaren, etc., creating their own sim racing teams. So we're still very, very early days there, and the truly talented guys haven't arrived yet. You know, if you compare, um, what's the motocross thing where they're doing the backflips and stuff in the X Games? Forgotten the name. But if you compare the tricks that they're doing now compared to the tricks they were doing 10 years ago,
Right.
10 years ago, when Travis did the first backflip in the X Games, it was beyond a revolution. Now they're doing front flips, they're doing double backflips, they're doing double backflip Supermans, and it
Hmm.
just takes time. So we're still in the very early days, and it just amazes me because when I was 13, 20 years ago, I got Gran Turismo 1, and I almost immediately realized that I could use this thing to become a racing driver. And now I use it to become a better racing driver. I can give you an example where I was struggling to drive these cars which had understeer built into them. I could not rotate the car around a corner. Um, so I went to the Sims and I used cars which had chronic understeer, or I set them up in a way that they had chronic understeer, and learned a way to drive these cars fast so that the AM could be fast and myself.
Right.
And if I didn't put those hours in on the sim, I wouldn't be in the position I'm this year. I'm driving much better this year, but it came from practice on the sim.
Right.
Um, and I'm waiting for the crossover. I'm waiting for. I know we had some GT Academy guys become racing drivers, um, but let's see if, and I don't see why not. By the way, it's just going to take time. Let's see when one of them becomes a Formula One driver.
Right.
Seriously, it sounds silly
Yeah.
now. You'll laugh now, not us, but some listeners may laugh now. But I think it's a matter of time.
I think I think also like one thing that I've kind of envisioned for the future of sim racing and why I want to get into, you know, that market is the future of not only uh, sim racing drivers go to the real world, but there becomes an opportunity for sim racing drivers to become a professional sim driver and have professional teams and series that and
Yeah,
sponsorships that are like offering real payouts. And I think I mean, it's going to come with time. The software, like you said, needs to get better. The viewing experience needs to get better. Um, but yeah, I
but we're
think
so close though. I mean, before I got on this podcast, I was watching the latest Gran Turismo. They have the FIA championships, and I was watching the most recent race, and they have commentary and stuff. It's there, and I think the sim races are going to earn more money than the real races at some point because there's more money in sim racing. There's more money in esports.
right.
Let me rephrase that. There's more money in esports
Well,
than there is in,
you don't have to pay a quarter million
yeah,
dollars per season. You know, you can
or
pay
even a
you can
million.
pay.
You know,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's super interesting. I think
yeah.
I don't think one will be better than the other. I think they'll just be two different things. But
Yeah, it will be like we're comparing rallying and GT. There'll be rallying, GT. There'll be esports. Obviously, the subcategories within the
right,
esports. There'll be electric racing. There'll be combustion engine racing. Um, I actually think we are already in a pretty purple patch for motorsport. Yes, I would say some series are not delivering what they should, like WEC, for example.
hmm
But there's too many. There's almost too many GT3 teams at the moment. So you have to have like Blancpain Sprint. You have to have GT Open. You have to have ADAC GT Masters because there's not enough championship to go around for all the cars they want to enter. And we're seeing like it happened last year with Blancpain. Um, they had 33 or 34 cars on the grid in the sprint series, and it was carnage. This year they have 20 to
hmm
25, and it's a bit calmer. And then you look at ADAC GT Masters, they have 34 now, and it's carnage. So things are
that's
oversubscribed.
right. Which
And
it's that's not. I
I
mean,
mean,
definitely better to be over than under. I think that's what's
oh, for
killing.
sure. I'm not complaining for 1 second.
Yeah, that's what's kind of killing WEC. I mean, it's like these the the whole like what is LMP1 anymore? You know, I mean,
Exactly. And it's a bit embarrassing, to be honest.
yeah,
I mean, no disrespect to the teams and stuff, but we saw two cars take off in Eau Rouge. Um, we've seen the Manners barely make it across the line in Le Mans. They didn't even enter in Silverstone. The Toyotas were disqualified in Silverstone. Um, it's comical, but I think WEC as a whole, except for LMP2, but GTE Pro, the BOP situation is a bit of a farce. And it's just so we. I know we're sidetracking a little bit here, but how is it possible that Blancpain can get BOP so right, and yet the World Endurance Championship cannot get it even close to right? I
hmm
just don't get it. In Spa, the Fords did a 2:11 qualifying time, and the Ferraris did 2:13s. And then at Le Mans, the Porsches were 3 seconds faster than everyone, or 2 seconds
yeah,
faster.
yeah,
It should not be that way at that level. It is.
yeah.
It is.
That's true.
It's.
I mean, especially if Blancpain
Yeah.
can,
So
they can balance a Bentley, you know, with a Ferrari.
yes, versus a
So
Ferrari.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard
It's
that.
because they
Like,
have their own test drive.
yeah,
In Blancpain, when we were at Paul Ricard for the official test, the day after the official test, they were doing balance of performance testing with one driver between all manufacturers. Um, yeah, so you know,
yeah,
it's just the nature of racing.
yeah, for sure.
I'm just thankful that Blancpain got it so right.
Yeah, man, you're killing it. I mean, like I said, I think it was 2016 when you were putting out those Super Trofeo videos, and yeah, that was
2015, yeah,
15. Yeah, and
yeah.
yeah, it's been
You were
cool.
one of my first comments, man.
Oh, really? That's super funny.
Yeah, I remember.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's what
yeah,
I mean. That, but like what you did though is you put yourself out there. You put a GoPro on your helmet and then posted it,
mm.
and people are interested.
I looked at it from my own perspective. I mean, I'm a I'm a motorsport addict through and through. I'm a fan before I'm a racing driver, so I visit Autosport 50 times a day. I visit, dailysportscar.com 20 times a day. And I was just frustrated at the time with the lack of onboard footage that I could find of any kind of racing besides Formula One. So I figured I'd just do it for myself and then see what came of it. And people love it.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't get tens of thousands of views. Okay, some of them do. But yeah, I will continue to do at every opportunity that I can put the camera on my visor almost, I do it. And you kind of have to sneak it around. You can't just do it in official practice.
Hmm.
Um, and I rewatch my own onboards later anyway,
Yeah,
so I'm happy to share where I'm allowed. I'm not allowed to share any of my Suzuka stuff, which is a shame. But
yeah, that'd be super
yeah,
cool to
the
see.
other stuff, yeah,
That's
the team wouldn't let me.
such a
So,
legendary track. But what kind of what's some future goals for you then? I mean, what where you see yourself going?
well, you always have to have the sort of the unattainable goal as the pinnacle. So becoming a factory driver for Ferrari would be the most tearful day of my life. So I always have that in the back of my mind. I don't know how realistic it is necessarily, but that's what I think of when I'm driving.
Hmm.
Just be as good as I possibly can, and maybe one day I get that phone call. So that's the thing I dream of. That's my dream. But in the short term, I would like to be paid on a consistent basis to drive racing cars. I've already achieved a lot of what I set out, and that was to. I mean, when I got into GT racing, I was paying. I was a gentleman driver.
Hmm.
Um, and then when I started to do well, I was like, well, I don't want to pay anymore. I want to race for free. And I'm at that phase. So I'm already very grateful for what I've received, but I always want more. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten here in the first place. I didn't move countries and break up with my girlfriend and have massive family issues just so I could race for fun. So,
Right.
um, and obviously getting to Le Mans. But so far, the offers or that I've had to get to Le Mans have all been, requiring a lot of money, and I don't have that. So I figured, okay, well, if I'm racing for Ferrari, then I'll get to Le Mans that way. um, but I'm not the only driver who dreams of getting to Le Mans, and in some ways, that was my initial dream. By the way, was get to Le Mans or race in Le Mans, even if I have to pay. Um, but that is kind of that dream. In some ways, is fizzled in a way. The draw to race there is not as strong as it used to be because I've been so lucky to do Spa 24 and also Suzuka. So, I've done a decent amount of endurance racing in the last 3 years, and it's been phenomenal. So it hasn't filled the bucket of satisfaction to the brim, but it's gotten 75% of the way
Yep.
there. So Lamar will fill the rest, but it will be a bonus. It'll be cherry on top of what I've got to experience so far.
I mean, look, if there's anyone there's no question that you're I think the most dedicated racing driver that I can find. That I mean, as good as as dedicated as anyone on any grid. I mean, I've seen so many, like you say, like the dream of being a factory driver. Like I've watched so many test videos of onboards at Fiorano. And it's like closed
Mm,
to the public. It's this like secret track that
mm.
people try to put a camera over the fence and stuff. And yeah,
Yeah, I was there once.
really.
I was when I was 20. How old was I? I was 21, and for my birthday, my parents agreed to pay for me to do one European karting race. No, hang on, I lie. Everybody, I lie. Backtrack. It was the beginning of the year of my 21st birthday, and my karting mentor phoned me and he says, "There's this race in Italy, karting race. I think it was like 6,000 euros. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And my dad said, "How are you going to pay for that?" And I said, "I have no idea. This is so you're not going to do the race then." So then I was like, "Damn." But he said, "I'll pay for your flight to go and watch it. You can be a mechanic or something."
Mm.
So I went as a mechanic. It was freezing cold, and it was raining and snowing, and it was hell. But anyway, on the last day, we went to Fiorano, and on that day, something was going around, and we were like, "Whoa, hear that? It's Formula One car!" And I stood where the bridge is, where you can look over onto the racetrack, and I saw the car going around. It was a Formula One car, and I'll never forget that. And then this year, I got they had the Ferrari Awards there,
Hmm.
and I was receiving awards inside the walls of Fiorano, and I still think back now. I'm like, this is completely ridiculous. You know, I I was literally one of those kids just looking over the wall, dreaming of one day driving or getting to sit inside a Ferrari of any kind. To me, was phenomenal. I mean, I'm a huge car fan as well. I used to go to the Ferrari dealership in Cape Town and just stare at the cars. And now I get to race them, and it's ridiculous, man. It's completely ridiculous. And I'm super grateful to the people who helped me get here.
I hear that was like I follow so many like entrepreneurs or even like professional athletes, and they all say a similar thing where it's like I could have never imagined it.
Yeah,
But then
you can't.
I mean, is it and I've kind of I've kind of come to like a hybrid theory on success. I feel like I mean everyone works hard, um,
Mm.
but it seems like you have to have it takes an unbelievable dedication like you've had, but with a little splash of luck too. Because I mean,
You need luck.
yeah.
My luck was when I decided to do a GT race. Okay, I was watching Le Mans and I realized, why shouldn't I be there? I did the math, 180 drivers. Why can't I be one in 180? Cold everywhere. None of the teams wanted me. Eventually, I got introduced to an ex-South African who was living in the UK called Alan, and he found a seat for me in Italian GT as a one-off thing. The team wanted 15,000 euros. I only had 12,000. They agreed to do it for 13,000. Then I realized that I didn't even have the money for the helmet and the suit, so I used the team manager's helmets and suits. Um, but the luck was my engineer was a freelance guy that got called in at the last second to engineer my car. And he was very respected and connected in the Italian sort of GT world. So when the 2014 Super Trofeo World Finals took place, they needed a bronze driver, and this guy thought I was really good. His name is Gianfranco, and he called me.
Hmm.
And even though that race itself was a disaster, I had brake failure and broke my leg. That same team called me the next year in 26 or in 2015 to race an Italian GT championship, and that's where I went. I went from there. I didn't plan on meeting Gianfranco. I could have very well have had no engineer for that
Mhm.
race, but I was lucky, 100% lucky to have had him.
But at the same time, I kind
That's
of
what.
go back too, because did you make that luck? Because you put yourself out there, and probably the conversations that you never heard were, hey, look, this guy's bloody fast, but he's borrowing a helmet from his manager. you know, um,
Hmm.
he's given it everything he's got. And that's the conversation that you probably never heard, but then that's, like, what, I should call this guy. That makes me think about, I don't know.
Um, well, at that point, the guy who helped me, Alan, who he eventually became a manager, but at that point, he just saw me as another gentleman driver who was paying to tick the box,
Mhm.
and that's how I pitched it in the email because I didn't want to sound ridiculous. Um, uh, so a lot of it was luck, and I mean, I remember the conversation was after the race, the Italian race. I almost finished in the podium, um, and Gianfranco said, "And now what?" And I said, "Well, now I go home and carry on with my life." And he's like, "No, but you have some talent. You have enough talent to become a professional." And then I was like, that was it. I wish he never said that sometimes. When I'm really struggling and like struggling for money or whatever the case is, or I'm like, why did Gianfranco say that to me? I could have just gone home, focused on my business, and been pretty happy. But I'm happy he did
here's
say that.
here's a real question.
Yeah. Shoot.
How many times have you almost quit?
Um, uh, Twice maybe, and the one. Okay, well, I quit karting, so you could say 3 times. But when I quit karting, I was 23. I finished sixth in the world in Rotax, and had spent my last dollar to get there, and had no opportunities, and I was frustrated because at the time I thought it was all about talent. But I said to myself, then I'm stopping, but I'm not giving up. I'm going to focus on my business, and I'm going to work flat out on my business till I can make enough money to come back and do it properly. However, so that wasn't quitting, but I remember um, after Spa in 2016, where I'd had a massive fallout with my sponsor. We had a shocking race. I had nothing. I had nothing left. My girlfriend kicked me out the house. I moved in with my friend who gave me a bed that I could sleep on because I couldn't afford anything because I'd used all that money already.
Mhm.
Uh, and there was nothing on the horizon, and I just thought, how the hell am I going to keep doing this? It just keeps beating me down. Um, but I just kept trying, and then this year, um, after the Ferrari Awards, I called it quits in my head because I remember. I mean, I got to the Ferrari Awards, and I'd been told that day that there was no place for me at any of the teams because I'd just been upgraded from bronze to silver. And I was on a treadmill, and I was just like, just David, just keep running. You never know. Like, you may need to be fit for something. Um, but at the same time, I'd essentially given up. And then the day after the awards, I said, this can't be it. And was reading an article on Daily Sports Car, and they mentioned that Rinaldi Racing hadn't decided on their GT Open lineup. So, assuming that they were looking for a gold driver, I cold emailed and said, I'm a silver driver. and and they replied. So big thanks to Rinaldi. But yeah, at that point I'd quit in my head. I'd given up. But not. It fluctuates, I suppose. I've only been in that place twice now where I'm just so emotionally drained that I can't keep doing this. But then I have my brother who's always reminds me. He's like, well, David, I'm sure someone is having a more difficult time, and he's always right. So I just pick myself up. But yeah, those are the 2 times where I've almost quit. I was pretty angry this year, to be honest, because I'd done so well last year, and there was no opportunities. It's like, how is this sport? even
Right.
how is this a sport? It's not a sport, it's a business. You know?
Right. And it's almost like it seems like those that are destined to do it, they in all reality, like the logical thing to do is say, you know what, this is just too unreliable
Yes,
and too hard to make it logistically a career.
yes.
But then for some reason,
You just keep
those
trying.
that persevere, they do it anyway. They don't
Well,
they don't like
you've got to outlast your competition. So I don't know. When I started in 2015 with the full intention of becoming a pro, um, okay, so I did my one-off race at the end of 2014, but in 2015, when I was doing the Italian GTs, I was like, I had the belief in me that I could become a pro. I don't know how many other drivers there were at that time who felt the same, but eventually stopped. But all I know is that I'm now racing consistently in GT3s in a Ferrari, and this is far beyond my expectations. And I truly did not. I had those urges to quit, but I never gave up. I just couldn't. I can't stomach it. I can't stomach the thought. Every time I thought about quitting at the beginning of this year, I was getting sick. It's like it just can't be the end, you know. Um, and I know lots of racing drivers think that way, but you got to just get creative, I suppose. And
right.
you want to talk about luck, like what is the odds that in a daily sports car on the daily sports car website they never report really on tests, and it's usually they just publish lap times, but this time they had a test report. So I mean, it wasn't lucky that I was reading the article because I read everything motorsport related, but it was lucky that how this thing fell into place that I got myself into a seat this year.
Cool, man. Yeah, that's that's powerful and it's so true. I think you're doing the right stuff. Can't wait to see what happens in the future for you. So
Yeah, let's see. I, yeah, I mean, I'm actually pretty happy in the pro am categories right now. I can't believe how lucky I am, and the team I'm with is genuinely amazing. Michele Rinaldi, who runs it, is a really really good engineer. He's very hands on. Reminds me of my karting days, which is why I'm enjoying this year so much. I would like to drive more. Like this weekend is Sachsenring and Addock, and I'm like, damn, how do I get there? Still waiting for like a random phone call, like
yeah,
tomorrow afternoon. David, we need you in the car. I'm there. So
you're
I'm
good,
always
man.
hungry for more. Always hungry for more.
That's
Yeah,
cool. So who do you think is going to win the F1 championship?
Hamilton, no question. Let me tell you why.
Yeah.
Every driver has their flaw, right? And with Vettel, it's when it's at that peak moment of pressure, high stakes pressure, he cracks and he makes mistakes. Hamilton's never had that issue. His issue has always been from the outside looking in. Okay, outside looking in is a perception that he's lazy, and when he has an
Mm-hmm.
off day, you usually find out later that he went to bed at 1 a.m., 3 a.m. He was at a club, he was at a mate's house, he was doing something he shouldn't have been doing, and that's why he did badly the next day. That is easy to fix. But if you cannot cope at that sort of extreme pressure, the only time you get to practice that extreme pressure is in the heat of the moment in Formula One. You can't do that on the simulator when the stakes are that high. Hamilton doesn't crack under that kind of pressure. He only does badly when he's lazy. But you can fix laziness, and to me, it looks like he's fixed his perceived laziness. Okay, the guy seems to be working really hard. He talks about the mental game a lot. He's in good
Mm-hmm.
spots. And there's no ways Vettel can beat that. I'm sorry. On a purely skill level, he needs to stop making mistakes and maximize his car advantage. But I fear that maybe it's too late. If Hamilton loses this championship, it's because of external issues. It's going to be engine failures or something.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I've been a sub fan, and I've actually kind of been a little bit of a Hamilton hater the last like 2 or 3 years, but it was actually it was this year actually that I really do respect him because and it was actually just at Monza where Rosberg um, they were asking him about the crash, and Rosberg was saying, he's like, look, you don't. What was he saying? Gosh, I wish I could quote it better, but it was basically you
I think
can't.
you can't make mistakes against Hamilton.
Right, right. That's not how you. That's not how you beat Lewis. Is something like what he
Yeah.
said, and you have to be basically perfect. And
Yes.
that's what I mean. That's what Rosberg did really well. Is he wasn't the fastest, but he made probably the fewest mistakes. Plus, he kind of got lucky with different. Lewis had gotten
He had
started
the
from the
engine
back of the
failure,
pack a
Pain.
couple
Yeah.
times. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that was how he did do it. Was because he didn't crack under the pressure. You know,
That's why I
and
respect Rosberg's championship win.
right.
Vettel's had the opportunity to tighten the screw on Hamilton, and that was the difference. Where the reason Rosberg won is because when he had those opportunities to tighten the screw, he delivered. Whereas Vettel, for example, in Germany, where he was leading, and also in
Yeah.
Monza, we had a dominant car. Those were two opportunities where I think Rosberg in that specific year would have delivered, and it's where Vettel is not delivering. Um, Look, I mean, I still think Vettel's a better driver than Rosberg, but Rosberg knew how to beat Hamilton, and
Right.
Vettel is just not delivering.
Because
And,
he could at least get a podium in that situation.
yes, and
Versus,
look, I've never really liked Hamilton's sort of attitude, but I've always respected and I consider him one of the greatest of all time. I think he will go down as the greatest of all time. Um, and I study his onboards a lot, and to the trained eye, his ability is phenomenal. And I speak to many, many racing drivers, professionals, and they all agree with me. Well, I agree with them. He is doing things that not all of us can do, but you need to understand or have experience in a racing car to see what he's able to do. To anyone who listens to this, like an example is go watch the Germany race on the onboard videos on the F1 site, on the F1 TV site. Watch Vettel like 3 laps from the 3 laps before when his crash, and compared to Hamilton, it's phenomenal, and that's the difference. Hamilton is a genius. Frustrates me, but he is a genius. Frustrates me because I always thought he was lazy, but he's obviously not. I joke with my
mhm.
brother that in Colorado he has his own Formula One track because he's so good.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, but then yeah, but I think that's what it does. I think that's why he does like his skill and ability is. You're right. I think right there with the best of all time. But then
Hmm.
he like after a win, he'll just say silly stuff like love wins all or whatever it was.
Best fans, but that's his
Yeah,
mental state. He's blocking as much negativity as he can because it does affect
that's
him.
true. That's true.
He
Yeah.
he he wants to be loved. He's reflecting. Um, so when people give him booing and stuff, his coping mechanism now, he's just at one with himself. He understands himself well enough to know how to combat that. But in the past, he would get very down. I remember watching interviews with him where he was just emo. Um, but I mean, credit to him, he's unstoppable. I know you're not an Alonso fan. I am, obviously. Um, but I don't think even Alonso in a McLaren, I mean, no, McLaren, in a Ferrari could beat Hamilton at the moment.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I think it's just the last like 5 to 6 years. He's kind of like he's just been like a shooter. It's like I think he had just a bit of a bad luck streak plus a bad attitude streak. And
oh,
like you said, he kind of
everything.
sabotaged his own career. I did read your article. I think you're more right than me. I mean, you're obviously so I agree. But yeah,
He did sabotage his own career. It's very frustrating. And now that he's quit F1 and he's mentally checked out, it's just it's being exasperated, it's being exaggerated how divisive he can be and the things he says, and you
Right.
can just imagine he was saying these things behind closed doors or similarly ridiculous things, and it's just like, dude,
Even like the scrap at Monza with Magnussen,
yeah,
that
I
you know
mean,
he's like
oh,
they
no,
both like ruined each other's laps, and Alonso's like, oh, he's trying to race me or something like that, and it just kind of shows like how little he does care now.
he has, ZFG, but yeah, I mean, you could think back to the Honda thing. He could have handled that better. He could have been, the whole McLaren team went up against Honda, and you know, there was two ways he could have done it. He chose to be negative. He could have been the
Hmm.
only guy that was positive and stayed stubbornly positive. That's what Hamilton's doing, by the way. He's being stubbornly positive about his racing, even when he has bad days. And I
Yeah.
think that helps. This is a mental game. Trust me, it's not about, the Formula One drivers are not the fittest people in the world. Do not believe that. Um, they're fit enough, but that's not what makes them great. It's their mental state. And yeah, I think. Can you imagine when McLaren realized that it wasn't the Honda engine? Imagine that meeting.
Right.
My gosh, I wonder that all the time now. I'm like, these guys sat there and blasted Honda, blasted them, and now they still the slowest through the speed traps with the Renault engine. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's not, because they always did say that. They're like, well, we got the best chassis on the grid.
Yeah, sure, guys. Sure. What a mess.
Yeah.
And I don't trust the management of McLaren. I think it's so sad what we're seeing there. I truly believe that. I think it's like this once great team is truly being self sabotaged into oblivion. Worse than Williams, in my opinion. Worse than Williams, because Williams still has Williams there.
Hmm.
I mean, these guys fired Ron Dennis, and for all his quirks, the man knew how to win. But I suppose couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, what can you do?
But that's part of the story. That's why they have the fans. I think you're right there too.
Exactly.
I mean,
If you didn't have the soap opera, you would not have the following. And that's what GT racing lacks, is a soap opera. But I think the opportunity is there. It just takes a journalist or a trackside interviewer, TV interviewer, to take a message, to deliver a message from one driver to
mhm.
the other driver and create the rivalry. I mean, that's what they do in Formula One. Hey, Alonso, did you hear what Magnussen said about you? No.
Right.
Well, he said this thing. What? I think he's an asshole now. Boom, you've created, pick a side. Which side are you on? We don't have that in GT racing.
Hmm.
Yeah. Have you ever watched this documentary, Jiro Dreams of Sushi?
No.
Man, oh man, it's my favorite thing in the whole world. I watch it like 10 times a year. But it's about this guy in Japan. He's like 90 now. And he was the first sushi chef to win 3 Michelin stars. And he's got like an 8-seater restaurant in the bottom of a subway, but his sushi is phenomenal. And he's like, since I was 10 years old, I've always been dreaming of making the perfect piece of sushi. So that's all he thinks about and all he wants to do. And like, from my side, being a racing driver, I just want to be the best racing driver possible. So I have to wake up every day and think of only that thing, like he does with his sushi. It's a unbelievable documentary, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So powerful.
I'm gonna buy it right now.
Jiro Dreams of Sushi. Everyone should watch that. I tell every young racing driver to watch that. So when I see instances or hear of instances where the press don't ask any questions during our post-race interviews, or I don't know, the commentators aren't lingering in the pits, I'm like, we're not maximizing our opportunities yet to become the best that we can be at our profession. No matter how good you are, you should always be looking at ways that you can become better. So it frustrates me when I spot things like that. And who knows what my blind spots are? I know I have many. There are days where I don't exercise. I will openly admit that. But we should always strive to fill those gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the money. That's the money line right there. So yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I mean, like I said, I've been following you for a
No
while.
problem.
I'll keep doing it. Maybe we'll do this again sometime next year. We'll see what y'all
Absolute
did,
pleasure. Yeah, and
and
hopefully still racing.
yeah, we'll be hearing about your Le Mans
If,
prep and all that.
well, if I'm not racing on the track, I'll do some racing. So
Yeah, there you go.
yeah,
Cool. Well, thank you,
cool,
man. I
man. Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much for having me on the podcast.
Yeah,
Pleasure,
absolutely.
and thanks to everyone who tuned in. Much appreciated.